Chapter 9: The Executive Orders and the New Constitution. As we have progressed through the pages of this book, we have unveiled and fully documented from its earliest beginnings the overall story of the satanic, Babylonian, Simon Magus, Illuminati, Round Table, Socialist, Communist, Capitalist conspiracy to seize control of all the countries of the earth and to establish a totalitarian one-world government. The close tie-in between all of these movements is no coincidence. It was planned that way by Satan, the first Illuminist, who is the unseen ruler of this world. The reader must be aware by now of the clear, unmistakable pattern that flows through history, particularly modern history, now that the missing dimension has been supplied. Now, for the first time, national and world events which, when they occurred, seemed incredible, fantastic, unbelievable, and bizarre, now stand out in stark relief and assume real meaning. Now, at long last, world events fall into place and make sense. As these facts are undeniably true, it is only reasonable that we can expect to find that the insiders, whose lust for power and control over people is insatiable, have been frantically busy behind the scenes preparing unbreakable chains with which to shackle the people of the United States when the time is right. If this concept appears to be so far out as to be beyond the bounds of reason or possibility, you had better brace yourself for one of the most traumatic, spine-chilling, and hair-raising experiences of your life. Not only is this concept factual, it is fully provable, as we shall now see. What are executive orders? If a random poll conducted by the author is any indication, there are remarkably few people in the United States who have even the foggiest idea what executive orders are, let alone how they are created or put into effect. The most damaging of all the executive orders, EO, is 11490, the so-called Omnibus Emergency Preparedness Order that consolidated 23 previous EOs which President Nixon signed on October 28, 1969. By virtue of EO 11490, President Nixon declared a national emergency to exist on August 15, 1971, in connection with the nation's economy. At first glance, most of the EOs seem to be steps needed to enable the United States to prepare for and strike back in the event of a nuclear attack. This was not the whole truth. The 32 pages and 200,000 words of EO 11490 blanket every conceivable facet of today's gigantic and complex American society and guarantee that regardless of events, no part of it will ever be left without bureaucratic supervision from Washington. More frightening than all its contents is the omission of a definition of the phrase national emergency. The decision as to what constitutes a national emergency is left to the capricious whim of just one man, the president, whoever he might be. Effect of executive orders. Although there are presidential memorandums and previous EOs not specifically listed in this chapter, the author feels those excerpts referred to are the essential orders that must be studied by all Americans if they are to acquaint themselves with this sword of Damocles hanging over our heads. These orders establish the machinery which authorizes the president and his advisors to take control of every significant factor of the private sector of our society. The Office of Emergency Preparedness, OEP, is responsible for assisting the president in all emergency preparedness activities. Its director is a member of the Subversive Council on Foreign Relations. The OEP has 8 regional offices and is the final authority in all matters relating to a national security during the state of an emergency. Although Congress directed the development of the preparedness program, the author feels our rapidly changing world and our shifting political bases can overnight transform a seemingly beneficial government edict into an absolute dictatorship. In this age of assassination, the mantle of leadership could fall on any man at any time. The lure of total power contained in the executive orders might, in and of itself, invite a grab for power by radical elements within the government. History of executive orders. Under the Constitution of the United States, the President is vested with the executive power of the government, the power to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and the power to see that the laws are faithfully executed. From these powers is implied the authority to issue executive orders. An executive order has never been defined by Congress. In use from the earliest days of the Republic, the executive order was at first employed mainly for the disposition of public domain, the withdrawal of lands from federal reservations, and for other similar purposes. During World War I, the use of the executive order was widened as executive authority and power increased. In the early years, executive orders were not numbered, and since there was no uniform system of recording them, the total of the unnumbered orders is unknown. The validity of executive orders has been questioned many times, but a ruling as to the extent or limit to which they may be used has never been determined by the courts or by Congress. An executive order is not a law passed by Congress, nor ruling promulgated by the Supreme Court or any other court. It is a decree issued by the President and entered into the Federal Register, which becomes a law 15 days after its entry. A law just as valid as if passed by the Congress and approved by the Supreme Court. The expansion of the executive order into action, reflecting the growth of the power of the chief executive, took place during the administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt issued an executive order defining the outbreak of war in Europe as a limited emergency and was to remain in effect for the duration of the war and 6 months. At that time, it became inoperative, although it remained on the books, available for the next emergency. In May of 1941, FDR declared a state of unlimited national emergency, which was to remain in effect until the declaration ended. Another state of emergency was declared by President Truman in 1950 after Red China's intervention in the Korean War. Truman formally ended both the World War II emergencies in April of 1952, but expressly reaffirmed the 1950 declaration. Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon also reaffirmed it as each took office. Executive orders can mean martial law. A declaration by the President, including a national emergency, has always stopped short of martial law, although the President has that prerogative. Undoubtedly, it would be exercised in the event of an attack on the United States. The last use of martial law was in Hawaii a few hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. It is interesting to note that the tendency of martial law to perpetuate itself was demonstrated in that case. The military retained basic control of Hawaii until the Supreme Court in 1944 ruled that the continued use of martial law, long after the disaster conditions had ended, was unconstitutional. EO 11490 assigns emergency preparedness functions to federal departments and agencies, whereas Our national security is dependent upon our ability to assure continuity of government at every level in any national emergency type situation that might conceivably confront the nation. And whereas effective national preparedness planning to meet such an emergency, including a massive nuclear attack, is essential to our national survival, and whereas effective national preparedness planning requires the identification of functions that would have to be performed during such an emergency, the assignment of responsibility for developing plans for performing these functions, and the assignment of responsibility for developing the capability to implement those plans, and whereas the Congress has directed the development of such national emergency preparedness plans and has provided funds for the accomplishment thereof, and whereas this national emergency preparedness planning activity has been an established program of the United States government for more than 20 years. Now, therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me as President of the United States, it is hereby ordered as follows. The next 32 pages outline the emergency functions to be performed by these departments and agencies. 1. The Department of State. 2. Department of Treasury. 3. Department of Defense. 4. Department of Justice. 5. Post Office Department. 6. Department of the Interior. 7. Department of Agriculture. 8. Department of Commerce. 9. Department of Labor. 10. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. 11. Department of Housing and Urban Development. 12. Department of Transportation. 13. Atomic Energy Commission. 14. Civil Aeronautics Board. 15. Export-Import Bank of the United States. 16. Federal Bank Supervisory Agency. 17. Federal Communications Commission. 18. Federal Power Commission. 19. General Services Administration. 20. Interstate Commerce Commission. 21. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. 22. National Science Foundation. 23. Railroad Retirement Board. 24. Securities and Exchange Commission. 25. Small Business Administration. 26. Tennessee Valley Authority. 27. United States Civil Service Commission. 28. Veterans Administration. Here are summaries of a few more significant sections. Section 101, Purpose. This order consolidates the assignment of emergency preparedness functions to various departments and agencies heretofore, contained in the 21 executive orders and 2 defense mobilization orders listed in Section 3015 of this order. Section 3012, Redelegation. The head of each department and agency is hereby authorized to redelegate the functions assigned to him by this order, and to authorize successive redelegation to agencies or instrumentalities of the United States and to officers and employees of the United States. Section 3013, Transfer of Functions. Any emergency preparedness function under this order, or parts thereof, may be transferred from one department or agency to another, with the consent of the heads of the organizations involved and the concurrence of the Director of the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Under the terms of EO 11490, the President of the United States can order that a national emergency exists and can then take over all communications, media, seize all sources of power, electric, nuclear, petroleum, etc., control all food resources, seize and form all forms of transportation, control all highways and seaports, seize railroads, inland waterways, and storage facilities, commandeer all civilians to work under federal supervision, control all activities relating to health, education, and welfare, register every man, woman, and child in the United States, shift any segment of the population from one locality to another, control all devices capable of emitting electromagnetic radiation, institute extraordinary measures with respect to any facility, system, or service essential to national survival, take over farms, ranches, or timberland properties so as to protect, manage, and utilize them effectively. Freeze all wages and prices. Demand emergency welfare services, food, clothing, and lodging in private homes for those in need. Regulate the amount of your own money you can withdraw from your bank or savings and loan institution. Close the stock exchanges and freeze stock and bond prices. All of these items listed, plus many others clearly enumerated on the 32 pages, incorporating the nearly 200,000 words, pertain to every previous executive order ever issued unless specifically revoked.